Use this simple idea about intimacy to get people to like you. I'm going to ask you to help me play a game of people watching. I'll tell you about two people, and you tell me which one has a harder time making love connections. Ready? Meet person 1, Cooper is strong and athletic. He has a degree from Harvard, has traveled a lot, written books, given inspiring talks, and is now the CEO of a bright new company. He is worth a lot of money and has a lot of famous people as close friends. He is 43 years old and has a lot of money. Meet person 2, Simon, who is 29 and has a soft voice, just quit his 9-to-5 job as a data researcher to work on his own. As someone who prefers to be alone, he spends most of his time reading and hanging out with a small group of close friends. Simon doesn't think of himself as a very sporty person, but he does try to live a healthy life overall. Now that we know who would do better on Tinder, what about in real life? Which of these two people do you think is better at getting close to other people? You're probably smart enough to know that I set you up to say that Cooper was probably the most successful in love, but the real answer is Simon. You'd be right, too. Cooper is a very successful person, but being close to someone is more like a dance between two people. On the other hand, Simon knows what's going on. What do they do that's different? Cooper talks to people in what I call the pushing way, while Simon talks to people in the pulling way. The method of pushing. The first time I met Cooper, the first 5 minutes felt like he was telling me everything on his resume. I knew all about the best parts of his work, how much money he made from his most recent book, and which famous people had backed it. Even the funny parts felt like they had been practiced. Most of what was said about Cooper was about what he had done, not about who he is as a person. Every time I told Cooper something about myself, he would say something like, "That's awesome," and then tell me something about himself. He didn't ask any follow-up questions, and most of the time his words weren't a reaction to what I said, but rather a way to show that he had also done that. Cooper said that being a father was the most important thing in the world to him. But when he talked about his girls, he brought up their accomplishments in the same way. Lila just won an event at the state track meet, and Diana is in the running for a top award in science. He doesn't talk about how much he likes spending time with them or what makes them happy. His whole conversation showed how important he thought success was. But he didn't like it when the women he attracted had the same goals as him. Cooper came to me after trying matchmakers, online dating, and parties for single people. He said that his lack of success was because he was too busy and there wasn't enough chemistry. And since he had no trouble getting dates, he didn't think it was his fault. But I knew exactly how all the women must have felt when they went on dates with Cooper. The truth is that Cooper didn't make room for other people when he talked to them. It was all about Cooper, which made me feel very alone. The method of pulling. That is different from Simon. I met Cooper and Simon in the same week, and my answer to "how are you" was the same for both. "I've been thinking a lot about my purpose lately." Cooper nodded and said, "I've served more than one purpose. Tell me about the time." Simon, on the other hand, understood my philosophical problem right away. This gave me the chance to talk about my past, my fears, and my main goals in life. He then talked about a time when he had felt the same way and how he had found ways to get past it. In contrast to Cooper, Simon builds relationships slowly, and he works very hard to keep only a few of them. So, instead of practicing a flashy opening that will make a lasting impact, he stays interested and is good at building and keeping relationships. I started to notice that the talk was mostly about my thoughts and feelings, and as he asked question after question, I found myself deep in thought. I was surprised by how much I found out about myself during the talk. Simon didn't avoid talking about himself. It was that what he said made sense and was a straight answer to something I said or asked, rather than something he had already planned. So, the talk between the two people felt like a beautiful dance. It was funny, sad, insightful, and had a lot of meaning. You might guess that Simon doesn't go out on as many dates as Cooper, but he does have close ties with both partners and friends. Why it's so important to pull instead of push. One of the most interesting parts of writing on this site is seeing what people choose to highlight in your posts. And after more than 1 million views, this is the line that has been marked the most. In this world, there is nothing more beautiful than being accepted for everything you are. People need to feel seen for who they are before they feel fully accepted for who they are. When you push your stories, experiences, and feelings into that place, you make sure they won't feel seen or heard. On the other hand, when you pull their feelings, views, and experiences into the room, you make that person feel heard and valued for being their unique and authentic self. If you then reply without judging them and let them know they are right, you will have made them feel close to you. It's easy to figure out. Intimacy equals container plus vulnerability plus validation. Cooper fails at the first step. By taking up all the space in the container, the other person has no room to be themselves or be vulnerable. Strangely, pushing also makes the person doing it look like they aren't sure of themselves. When people list their accomplishments, what they're saying is, I need you to validate me. Think about your dates and love exchanges in the past few weeks. Which group do you belong to? Not sure? Here's how to figure it out. Getting ready to push. Cooper had a hard time understanding that getting a good result in a personal setting was very different from getting a good result in a business setting because he was so good at his job. He didn't know what pushing looked like, in short. So, let's look at some examples. Highlighting accomplishments means telling people how much money you make or have made, how high up you are at work, the famous people you know or have met, the number of countries you've been to, instead of specific travel experiences or how much you liked them, the awards you've won, etc. Repeating stories you've already told. Have you recently been on several dates and found yourself telling the same story over and over again? If you always wait for your turn to talk instead of replying to what the other person is saying, this could mean that you never listen. Taking over the discussion. Most of the time, the people who push are the ones who speak. They have so many stories about themselves to tell that they might not even notice if the other person is getting bored or upset. They also tend to feel awkward when there is a pause and fill it up right away with stories about themselves. Sharing what other people think about you. For example, my clients love me. They couldn't live without me, or they begged me to come back. There's no reason to say this unless it has something to do with the question that was asked. A lot of talk about your needs, wants, and expectations. The next time you're in a chat, pay attention to how often you say I and how often you start a line with I need, I deserve, or I want. Giving answers that aren't asked for. Another sign of pushing is telling people what they should do instead of just listening to them. If you are always trying to fix other people's problems but don't get any thanks for it, you are probably pushing. If any of these sound like you, don't worry. There's an easy way to fix it. Here's how to pull more out of life. How to pull to make a connection. Pulling is a tricky skill. You must be interested in the other person and give them your full attention. You can pull in the following ways. Listening for threads. People often say very quickly what they care about now. Most of the time, it's something that's making them worried or stressed out that day. Some of the threads are not as obvious as others. It's up to you to see it. Simon knew right away that I was having trouble finding my purpose, so he kept up with the thread. Validating emotions. Remember that people care much more about how they feel than what happened. It makes sense that you would feel that way. That sounds stressful, or I'm sorry you had to go through that. Asking follow-up questions about how people feel. Once you've found a thread, it's important to ask a question about how people feel. It's better if you can start that question with a comment that shows you've been paying attention. For example, if someone says they are thinking about quitting their job, you could say, "It sounds like your job is really important to you. Why do you think you want to quit?" A question about how you feel, instead of how long have you been working there. Fact-based question. When you hold a mirror up to someone, you help them see themselves differently. For example, if someone quits their job to focus on a side job full-time and is feeling unsure about their choice, you could help them see how brave they are. Casual flattery is when you say something like, "That's cool that you like to travel." Real praise is when you say something like, "I think it's cool that you were so willing to try the local food and learn the culture." If you're reading this and thinking, "Do you mean I shouldn't talk about myself at all?" That's not at all what I mean. After all, two people are still the only way to get close.